up into A and B so they could come back down during the day, and both of them were generating electricity, so it's a storage device, right? But they didn't have dams in Denmark, as they were asking, how can we do this? So what they're doing is the government funded a private auto company, basically gave the startup funds to a car company, and they're making electric cars. And the way it's going to work is you plug the electric car in at night, and you buy electricity from the power grid for, say, 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and you charge your car. And then in the morning, your car's fully charged, you drive to work, which uses maybe 5% of the charge, and you got a 95% charge of the car. You get to work, you plug it in, and you sell that electricity back to the grid for 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're making a profit on selling electricity back. By the end of the day, your car is discharged down to about 80%. And there's this threshold. You can set the car to say, okay, this is how much I need to get home. Don't go over this. So you sell as much as you can during the day while you're at work. And then you drive home and you plug it back in and it charges back up. And they figured if they could get 1 million of these cars in a row, which they think they can do within about 5 years, that they can take that 18% capacity and double it and provide 36% of the electricity needs of the country without adding a single window. And they get 1 million cars that are burning gasoline on the road. I mean, and they're actually doing it. So, there's tremendous hope. One of the big lessons that we found was that the biggest indicator of the success of a society, and there's a whole bunch of different indices that you can use to measure this. One of the most fascinating is trust. Ask people these are national surveys that are done by the United Nations all over the world, and they would just ask citizens whether or not they agree with the statement. You can trust the average person in the industry, the average stranger in the industry. And in some, percentage of people who say yes to that question is the level of trust in a community or in a country. And it tracks, the level of trust tracks, as trust goes up, homicides go down, infant mortality goes down, lifespan goes up, diseases go down, alcoholism, drug addiction go down. All the good stuff gets better, all the bad stuff gets less. And trust is part of that batch. But what is the thing that drives it? Well, it turns out it's equality. When you compare this is my rant in the first hour of my show today on the radio, from 9 to 10. When you compare the income of the top 20% in a society to the bottom 20% of society, the spread that you see between those two is one of the greatest indicators. Richard Wilkinson has just done some brilliant research on this. He has a new book out called The Spirit something. On this topic, the spirit line. Anyway. And he's written other books on this. And there's a whole bunch of other researchers as well. And it's like, this is really starting to become a lot of this is being published in the UK, by the way. That in the United States, the spread between the top 20 and the bottom 20% is around 8 to 1, 9 to 1, in some cases 10 to 1. And in Japan, it's about 3 to 1. In Denmark, it's about 3 to 1. So in those countries where the equality is higher and the inequality is not as great, in those countries you see these better outcomes by virtually all the standards of life, of quality of life. There is, however, another threshold involved here, and which brings us back to point 4. Abraham Maslow suggested that there was a hierarchy of human needs, and that it was characterized as a pyramid very often. And at the bottom was the need for homeostasis, to breathe, to drink and eat and sleep, keep your body temperature regulated and all that kind of stuff. The next step up was safety and security. The next step up was friendship relationships, one-on-one individual relationships. The next step up was intellectual needs. And then finally, at the very top of the pyramid was what we call self-actualization, the desire or ability to go, the spiritual experience. And the point that Maslow made was that wherever somebody is on this hierarchy, everything above that point is largely invisible. So if somebody is stuck in safety, they're not thinking about relationships, they're not thinking about being one with God. If you're caught in the middle of a busy street and traffic is whizzing by in both directions and you're thinking, holy cow, I may not make it across the street, that's all you're thinking about. Or a person who's starving to death, who's stuck at homeostasis, they're not even concerned about safety. Walking around Open-Char, there were no buildings. People were defining their territory or their little plot with bits of trash, basically. And there are actually no rocks in this part of Spain. The soil is so old, this part of Africa is so old, that the soil is not even sand. It's so fine, it's just dust. That's all there is, it's just dust, it's clay. And so, there was just, people weren't even concerned about safety and security, other than, that they were scared to death about the northern Sudanese coming there. So what it turns out is that when you look at richness in a country, wealth in a country, that once people get above a certain point, and that point seems to be around $5,000 US dollars per year for a family in income. Once countries get above that point, and South Sudan is way below that, they're down there, around $50 to $100 per capita income. But once you get around above between $3,000 to $4,000, after that, from there all the way up to the $44,500 a year median income of the United States, we being the richest country in the world right now. And close to us are a number of other fairly wealthy countries, the UK, for example. But no matter where you are along that line, quality of life has nothing to do with how rich people are. Quality of life has nothing to do with how rich our country is. And when they compare states around the United States, quality of life has nothing to do with how rich a state is. Instead, quality of life is entirely defined by the equality within that state, which takes us to this idea of our being hardwired for democracy. The two quick stories. One, they're both in the book. One is the story of the red deer. I've been telling this for years on the radio. Many of you probably heard it. Some of you probably haven't. And so I'll revisit it very quickly. We, scientists for a long time, assumed that most mammals were patriarchal and hierarchical in their cultures and in decision-making. Because they looked at human society and saw that we had kings and queens and assumed that we would be a hierarchy of it because our cultures were hierarchical, that those cultures would be hierarchical. And so there were a couple of researchers, Tim Roper and I forget the initials, Conrad Roper were the two scientists at the University of Sussex who decided to look at this in animals. And what came out of this was a subsequent study that was published in Nature, as I recall, and it might have been Science. And what they did at this university is they had a herd of deer in a nearby forest, and they positioned cameras in trees and they're watching the deer to see how they behave, to look for leadership among the alpha deer, because these deer have annual rituals where the males bang their heads against each other, and certain males will establish dominance, and they will be the alpha deer, and everybody assumed that the alpha deer was making all the decisions for the group. And so there were 3 watering holes there, and the question was, how do the deer know when to go to one hole or animals? Now these are not small or insignificant questions, because if they go too early, then some of the deer may not get enough nutrients.